I was gonna say good morning, but it just turned noon here. It's exactly 12 o'clock here. Good afternoon, guys and girls. I don't know why it still shows 0 viewers. This thing never updates on my side for some reason. Okay, so this is pretty, like, I'm not surprised that we stalled here. This was a pretty big spot for us, especially when we looked at that 10-day potential outside bar range yesterday, which I didn't really think that they would end up achieving that, but anyway, like if they did come back and try retracting, there was a lot of overhead close to the 68.46, and this is 50% of the time interval range too. Something else that I noticed is they held this area here this morning from yesterday, and when I was tracking this, I was like, oh, okay. And they also held our 6.778 overnight. I just like that this was aligned with those fibs too. So I don't know if anyone of you guys used those fibs that we talked about yesterday, but they worked out pretty nicely if you did, especially off the 67.20, the 6.77882, and then again in here off like 68.23 and the 13. So right now there really isn't anything except for this overhead. This is also 68 points off lows right here, by the way, where they're stalling. And they did take out 68 points, so that leads me to think that we probably will get these structural breaks here this afternoon. And if this is a core move, core areas usually break. Actually, wait. You guys are going to answer this. Core areas usually move how many points? If we've already moved 68, is this more likely to move 75, 77, or 88? Well, we've already moved 52 points, Katie. So what would be the next increment if it's a core range? Especially when looking at overnight lows and real-time lows. And like the overnight higher lows. '70s, right? Yes. Let's copy, paste. I don't have them in here, but typically when you move, you can just, if it's a micro core, I guess it's like 52, you can add another 25 points to that. So like they can move in like those 70 point intervals, and it would make sense because that's close to 5.8 if you're looking at this. Do you see this? Close to 51, 52. And that makes sense because that's the area that we were targeting today anyway. If they were to somehow break 88 points off overnight lows, we could trigger core ranges at 6866. Okay, 6875, 6883. Off of today's actual open, these are aligned with the zone. So we do have a lot of confluence around 6893. I looked at it this morning. I don't know if they can get there today, though. I feel like they should have moved the channel this afternoon in order for them to do that. But anyway, I also went ahead and did this off lows, so you guys have them. So we know for a fact that if we start breaking those ranges that why does it paste like that? That's strange. Oh, maybe that's just how Twitch interface works. I don't know. So there's definitely core odds. I just feel like for today's session, those are probably reduced at this point. Oh, it just deleted my flips. No, we had the 204 flip, which ended up being a reduction stick. There was multiple flips around this period here, which is why I jumped on, because we had a lot of odds close to just before 2 and just after 2. 204 reduced, which sucks because that would have been the stick break that could have likely gotten us out of this channel. 4.5 points, or at least back over to like 4.2, 4.3. Let's see. Yeah, that could have gotten us at least a break of these structural lows right here too. Maybe stalling there though. Are these pinnable areas for the session too, however? 68, 20s, 30s, and 40s. They are, so technically speaking, the market doesn't necessarily have to break much higher than this. This was kind of like a textbook breakout though too. Like they did a really good job holding the zone back here, especially overnight. They also held those core areas that we discussed. Which, okay, wait. Let's see if you guys remember. They held 6779, 6780, 6781 overnight. That was a huge structural hold. What are these spots? And don't say core and don't say upper core. What are these areas here? I talked about it for like a good hour before the close yesterday. Where did they end up holding overnight? And this is why I said if they can hold this area overnight, we have pretty good odds of clearing these neutral ranges and potentially getting, we couldn't quite clear 68.20s overnight, which is fine. That's probably why we're also stalling the channel, by the way, and not achieving core ranges, because if they would have pushed it overnight, then we probably would have gotten that. But what was that 668 or 67.79 to 81 area? Now, this is roughly that 9 points that we talked about. And this is probably why they never triggered these 50s yet, because yes, it is. The 256 points, exactly. So that's pretty impressive that they did that, is it not? See, look, like if they would have broken to 68.20 overnight, we probably would have already triggered these 50s, which are mid-core ranges. So there's definitely some reductions, but it's fine because that wasn't even a requirement. We weren't required to take out core areas last night. That wasn't part of my conditions. My conditions was to hold 7881, test 67.99, 6801, 6803. Try to sustain the zone. We did all of these things. They opened at 6805. I mentioned this morning. So when they opened at 6805, which was a little bit higher than these ranges in here, like the 6801, 6799. So I figured they might hold a few points above like that 6788, 6789, 6791, 6790. These areas were super calculated from yesterday, 678975. Why was 678975 calculated? Where did that area come from in the first place? And I mentioned this earlier, so it made sense. I'm just showing you guys the math right now, but that's why we have these kind of, it's at 5.5, 5.75. Why is 6788, 6790 area huge? This was from yesterday too. Why is the area so important? Do you guys see it? Okay, what are our super calculated spots that we talked about on the report? The 5-3 range, right? We opened at 5-4. 5-3 was really calculated. Ideally, we wanted to open closer to like 5-7, 5-8, because this area had a lot of confluence. But do you see that? So why would this area be super calculated? They also opened the market at 675, 775 on Monday. So this was this was the 132 point range. Okay. And where they held right here, I noticed from where they opened, since they opened a little bit above this 9.9, like that 5.75, I noticed that they also held above by 5.75. Do you guys see that? So today's open put us at an advantage, basically. Did we have room to go back to 67.90 this morning if they wanted to? Could they have gone back down here if they wanted to? Considering down here they basically breached, but held 8.7. 8.7 is also really calculated, by the way. That's the 128 point range, right? Or 132 off weekly open. Do you guys understand this or no? You guys have to like at least answer me so I'm not wasting my breath. Do you guys understand where they held last night? If you don't understand that, then at least say something so I know. Because these were really important structural holds. It wasn't like a random spot that they held. Okay? So they held exactly 132 points last night. Okay? Could we have afforded this morning to have gone back to 6789, 6790, like right here? There was a lot. This is a big area of support. Could we have afforded to have done that? If we had opened closer to 67 or 6801, 6803, I bet you anything they would have probably back tested there. Okay? Like if they opened this just a tiny bit lower, like maybe closer to like here, okay? We would have probably back tested this area here. The reason why we probably opened at 6805 is to prevent that 6786 from failing, okay? So they opened it a little bit higher. Does that make sense? Like maybe the max range you would have wanted to open this morning was like 6802. Okay? But I think where they opened it really helped us offset some of this risk. Especially here. What else helped us offset risk this morning? Ahead of this back test here. Because these were our overnight overheads, like the 01, 04, 05, which is where they opened it. But what helped us manage and sustain basically the 6796 area in real time today, which is like mid bear zones, like they still held 6799 or 6788. Come on, you guys. I have positions open too. What was something that really helped us offset risk this morning? Yeah, we tested 6820, 6824 in advance, okay? These structural areas, I don't know if you guys can see this. Like if we look at this from this structural break and off that 6805 opening range, basically, and then we measure from here to our 6786 area, like right in here, because that's 678675. It's almost like the exact structural hold. So this was really calculated. Where they opened, it was exactly 18.5 points on each end, okay? From those highs to those lows from here. And also taking out the 20s really helped us in terms of like At the very least, like just offsetting some structural support risk here. I didn't really measure exactly where they stalled, but I think it was 13 points. Oh wow, it's exactly 13 points. I didn't even realize that. So 13-point hold off highs or extension off highs. What's my rule? Usually you have to clear how many points to get continuation? Typically, like at a minimum. At least 12 to 13. No, for a minimum condition, 12 to 13. I always start with 12 to 13 points. And that's how much they moved off this overnight high. I didn't really see the range, but I think this was a 34-point break right here too. Yeah, it was. This was 34-point break here too. And then off these overnight lows, I think this was a 44-point break here too. Yeah, it was. So they broke 44 points here, they broke 34 points here, and they sustained or extended 13 points off overnight highs. So this was a pretty good odd that they would likely come back and revisit. Do you guys agree? Like the 68.20s based on that. Especially based off here. Okay. When I looked at it from real-time lows, this is kind of like the same thing, like a 13-point hold. This is when they started clearing close to 33, 34 points up here. I do think that they should have held closer to 68.33, but they did initially. And if you look at it from like the actual structural closes, can you guys see this, or is that kind of hard to see? Like if you look at it from like these actual structural closing points right here, do you guys see this? They tried their best to hold a 33, 34 point range. I don't know if you guys can see that. Do you see that? Earlier in the afternoon. So these were pretty good structural holds right here, especially off 3334, which is what is this area here? What's this area right here? This is also about a 5-point range. What's this area in here, guys? And this is why I figured, okay, if they hold there off these structural breaks, then they technically have an odd of sustaining. Technically speaking, they could come a bit lower. And they did, but they basically what they did right here though, they couldn't afford that risk. Do you guys see this automatic snapback over right here? When they took out 33, 34 points. Like look, from this area here. Are you guys paying attention? Between here and here. I measured to see what the offset was between these areas. It was like close to 3.5 and 4 points. To see if maybe that's kind of the risk that we can afford in terms of like these structural breaks right here. Okay. Do you see that? Like off of this low to here. Between 33 and 34 points. Let me know if you guys understand this concept. But the condition was that they'd have to like immediately retract that area because that was a lot of risk right here. Do you see it? Between here and here. And this usually happens when you start doing what? I noticed that this is almost always the case when you get crossovers. And that's usually when you don't fully fulfill either end. So did we fully fulfill the channel? No, we didn't, right? Did we cross back into the zone? This is very important, guys. This is going to be ahead of the break, so pay attention. Did we cross back into the zone? Yeah, we did. Well, no, right now we did. This is the zone. Not in the AM. We literally did right here when we went back beneath 3.2. Okay? So, and we've kind of had like these 9-point offsets recently. I've noticed like 8.5 to 9 points. So I just measured between the 3-4 area, which would have been the more ideal range to hold because that's like a 34-point range, okay, off these structural breaks right here. And then measure that off like the top range right here. And I figured these could be some of the overheads if they end up clearing the channel this afternoon. Okay, but so far off channel breaks, okay, these are the areas that we're struggling a little bit with. Do you guys agree? Like we never took out 4.8, 4.9, which is the top of the channel. I noticed right here there's about like 3 points left for us to finally break that channel. Okay, and that's probably the net differential now of where we have to hold. And what I mean by that is like above this 3.2, 3.3. I don't think we can go much further than this because where's that spot? 34.25 and 30, and basically this area in here. Do you see that? I'm gonna try my best to explain this in a way that it makes sense. Okay, do you see like this little, this here? Because this is where the zone starts, okay? Or the channel starts. In here, correct? Like around 3.3, 3.4, roughly. That's also the 33, 34-point range. We have to sustain around this area here, okay? At this point, because that's the offset. It's the same offset that could get us breaks to the top of the channel. Does that make sense? Because this is the last, this is like the equal increment basically of like how many points we are beneath the top of the channel and how many points we can afford to breach back into the zone right here. Is everyone on the same page? The differential between here and here is probably going to be that 5.5. Of course it is. And these could be the potential structural breaks that we get if we break the top of the channel. Okay, there's a lot of confluence around 5.2. Is everyone on the same page? And I'm just measuring off the actual highs that we hit. If you measure off the top of the channel, they should be aligned to like this 5.5 area too. And another way you could measure that would be if instead of measuring to the calculated range, measure up to the 3.4 area, and that's closer to like 9 points. So it doesn't matter. Either way you look at it, if you measure on top of the channel or the actual high, do you see the alignment at 685550? Can someone write these down, please? Izzy thinks that we have a lot of confluence today around 6852.25, 6855.50, 6855.75, with a slight odd around 6858.50. This is basically a crossover between a channel and the zone, but these are really calculated zone areas because we still sustained above our 6822 and 6824. 6824 is a really calculated spot, and they did hold, and they held exactly that 9-point ratio beneath the top of our, or the bottom of our channel, and then 5.5 points beneath 6830.5, which would be the exact same differential between where we're stalling right now to get up to 6852. And that area there is also the same offset of 3 points, which is what's preventing us from getting to 6849.75, which would be the top of the channel. So these are, in my opinion, pretty calculated spots. And we did have some odds around like the 230 window to come back and try clearing the top of the channel here. So, and the reason why this is happening too is because of the kind of dynamics we're working with. Like a 6805 open, neutral open usually gives you what kind of price action? And Jamie shared this morning, and I was really grateful for Jamie sharing that. What kind of price action does that give you? And I also noticed where they stalled this morning off here, left us with about 9 points, again, from the top of the channel, or top of the zone. So there's a lot of confluence with these ranges in here. Also from these overnight lows to real-time lows was also 9 points. Isn't this, are you guys listening? This is really cool. Like, look at this. That 9-point theme is so in play today. And I mentioned this yesterday. Like, markets have been offsetting a 9-point range. And I noticed that these areas would have been a little bit more calculated. And we had 9 points reduced yesterday. So I wonder if that theme carries into today, and it did. Isn't that insane? And guess what? Like 6625 is more aligned with 6881. 6871 is more aligned with 6615, but we held 6625. 6625 is weekly lows. And to make this even more interesting, this is also going to be like the 68-point break off these range breaks in here. If they were to break 5-5. Okay, off our 8-7 areas. Isn't that insane? That's a 68-point break. Okay, so 68 points off that 68-point break off our 6787 area is 6855. Off overnight lows, this is what should trigger those 76, 75 point core ranges. Does that make sense, guys? Because technically speaking, this is a core area. These would be mid-core areas. Core areas are usually like 20 in odd lots of basically 25, 50, 75, just as an easy way to remember that, okay? Is everyone on the same page? So that's where I think we have the highest level of confluence for today's session. I would be pretty surprised if they never tested the 50s today. Like, I think it would be really strange. And we have odds in real time to do it because they did take out that 684650 earlier. It's not like they stalled it. And they came back around right in time for mid-session here at 12:45:48 to take out the high. Even though they had that nasty reduction stick back here. And I think these little reductions that they did have though, okay, like these here, it's a total of like 22 points. I think this is basically what would have stalled us from getting, are you guys ready? You guys are not ready for this. I haven't even done it yet, but I already know that this is going to be the answer. What's a really big area of confluence that we figured out for the week? 68 what? 68. It's right above you guys. 6871, okay, is huge, correct? Yes, okay. When I looked at this reduction that they did off of the 4650 area to this low right here, is around 22 points. If you take 22 points above this, isn't that insane? If you measure off the actual 2-4 range, okay, because 2-4 was a little bit more calculated to wherever they stalled this, 4-7. Isn't that crazy? Look at that. It's so close to that 6871. And that would make sense that it's not 6871 because they held 6825, not 6824, or 6625, sorry, not 6624. They held 662525. So it would make sense that there's a 1.25 offset because 6624 is more calculated. Right? So what's 6869.75 plus 1.25? 6870? 6871? Right? Isn't it 6871? It is. Isn't that insane? Do you guys realize how crazy that is? So, and like 6625 is the weekly low, right? And we had a more calculated weekly low closer to 6623, 75, 6624. So there's about 1 to 1.25 point offset here. That would be insane if that's actually what they end up like triggering. I don't think today, but like in general for the week. And that would be a core to core break. And if you get full core to core ranges, then you would end up getting, let's say off of our area here, these should be 88 point breaks. Wow. These would be exactly like the 88 point intervals here off those lows, which is the 256 point break. Meaning if you extended 107 points, 108 points, you could get the zone entry at 87. And then the 132, 133 would give you that 6907, 6910 retest. Isn't that wild? And because this area here, FYI, 677981 is a 256 point hold. Okay, do you guys want me to write that on here so that you remember this? This area is 256 point hold, okay? What's half of 256? This area here, right? So that hold there is so calculated. You don't understand how calculated that hold is. No, half of 256 is the 128, 132 range. So, but if you did trigger 173, are you guys ready? If you trigger 173 points off those very calculated ranges here, is specifically that 256 point range, which I think was, hold on, let me just get the exact number, okay? Oh, you guys, they closed exactly at 256 points? How did no one say anything? I didn't even notice that this morning. You guys are the worst trackers. They closed at exactly 6781 yesterday. I never even noticed that. Okay, so off the closing price, if they break 173 points, what does that take you back to? Do you think that that's a coincidence? That is crazy. That is so insane. That is perfect math. That's nuts. That takes you right back to all-time highs. Today's close, yesterday's close, today's open are aligned with all-time highs, like to the T. Look at this. This is aligned to the exact penny. 173 point range off yesterday's close is exactly 6,953.75. 173 points is the 346 point range. We already know that 695375 is calculated because we calculated that before this even hit all-time highs. Go back and read the report from like a month ago. Do you know how nuts that is, you guys? What does that imply? Because that's only the 173 point range. That implies 70s 36, 71 25, so core areas. That's pretty insane. I wonder if that means that you guys, we're probably getting close to hitting those 320, 346 point intervals off lows today. Look. I forgot. So yeah, 6871 on top of everything else is also 346 points off lows. Like what? So triggering that automatically puts you back at an odd of doing that, which is pretty insane. Oh, this area is a huge overhead then. Okay, let me reset this and then focus in a bit, because I think now we know. Did any of you guys write down those areas for today's session at least? What was it? 6855.50? I think I have these areas marked from the past anyway with some notes in here, because these were really big spots that we stalled last time. There was confluence there last time anyway, so, and that's where I have some notes here at 6855.50, 685525, 6856. So it makes sense that there's confluence there again today too. And in the past, it looks like we stalled this 6842, because I have some notes in here from before. This is the previous high, which is also calculated table closer to 684275. Okay, so in the past, they had reduced and stalled there. And this was also a very big area for us that could expand us in the past. So it would make sense that this area could expand us again. What's our big target for the week then, you guys? What would be a big price target for the week? No. 6893 is big, but you guys are, why do you guys always fetch so far? You guys always go like so much further out, always. 6871. Like, let us hit the 50s first before you guys think about all-time highs. And we could be stuck here until afternoon. There was some odds like off the 1247 this morning or this afternoon all the way till 328 if they want to keep this stuck in the channel. So it might equate to like a late day break. What time is it? There's some odds coming up right here. I would say if they don't get this going before 3, then we definitely could stay stuck this afternoon until close to 328, 330. I also noticed that today's lows hit off 10 a.m. So there's a lot of structural flips for the 10 a.m. time frame in general. So usually when that's the case, this is a huge tip, by the way. These are all the 10 a.m. time frames, which equates to multi-flips. Multi-flips can end up doing what? Especially in a channel. What kind of price action do you typically have in a channel? That's exactly what's been happening all afternoon. That's why I knew stalling that 4-6 could keep us stuck. Yeah, this is a really choppy area in general. And typically if we hit lows at 10 a.m., which is a multi-flip structure, that means that they can just take it back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. There isn't too much like high confluence off that time of day that we hit lows, okay? So a channel, this is what I have in my notes. And where we opened today too, not those exact areas, but just use it off like 9 to 14 areas. We opened at 05. So today, definitely bulls held above, right? 68.13, 68.14, and you can see that in real time. We held, like, bulls took control here above neutral range, right? So, and they took it back to a bull area. Opening neutral gives you odds of both ends, so I don't really think that those areas imply too much volatility. They're more of just like consolidation, not really areas that like react. The channel is more of like, it's just to kind of build momentum. So no, I don't consider the channel an area of volatility. Usually after you clear there, then you can have a directional play. Okay. You guys like my notes that I made? Because I got tired of people asking me what this stuff means. This though is like where they opened, like in here. That was indecisive, but them holding 9-9 and retracing it immediately back over. So where is it? This. You see this? Like when they broke it down and then immediately retracted it, that basically suffices like, where did it go? Like the indecision, okay? And trying to get it back over 9-9, 02, 06. And they did it so quickly back in here. Like look at how quickly they brought it back over 9-9. Just so that this area is the area that could imply volatility. Okay, so if we do end up getting to like 5.2, 5.8, this is where we can really start to get some core expansions, rotations, extensions. That's where the market decides trend continuation versus reversal, okay? And that's why I said yesterday too, like, we'll know if the market wants to continue, okay? If, what did we say? I mentioned this yesterday, but basically we'll know if the market wants to have a continuation break based on, I think it was a 68.58. Yeah, like this area here. That, in general, that usually triggers higher moves. We didn't even have those. And this area, this is what I meant. Okay, this is why they might trigger this area instead, but this area is what's going to determine if we get an all-time high break or not. Okay, and even when I looked at this before, there was a ton of confluence in this area anyway, before we had this big break. So this is where the market could get stuck, okay? And even if they do, it's fine if they go back and forth like this before coming back to take out highs. Or what's another thing that they could do? If they because we're basically there. This is exactly what the chart looks like now. What could they do? If they bring it to the 6850s, 6860s, and clear, hint, hint, what could they do? I have access to every channel, Strikerman. Like, what do you mean? You're not in the wrong Discord. Those are probably some of my old channels. These are all in the Substack chat, though, so if you're in the Substack, you should definitely have access to that. What new channel? The Theories Guide, you should have access to that. That was all in the Substack channel, though, so I don't know what you're talking about. Like, those are all in the Substack channel. But, okay, assuming if we end up getting... Let's redraw that. If now that we're here, okay, and we know that this area right here could be a huge area for us, okay? Because this area is going to determine whether or not we get all-time high breaks, hence they're stalling just beneath 50. Okay? Because technically they can break and retest as early as the 28th, potentially by the 1st, and the first week of December, correct? We have odds of getting back to highs as early as then. Is everyone in agreement with that? What would they have to do in the 50s and 60s for that to be the case? Because I would say that if they stall 5-8, then we likely could enter that period of the consolidation that we talked about. Okay. What would they have to do? Yeah, they'd have to obviously not stall, right? So if they don't stall, what's a scenario that you could see from that? This is for core areas, or like mid-core areas. So that's where the market can decide trend continuation versus reversal, right? And they can easily push core extensions, right? Or come back and revisit the channel, which is where we are right now. So in theory, is the 52 to 58 an area that the market could really push if it wanted to? And guess what? If it does, that means it breaks that 320, 330 point interval. Because remember how I said market sometimes before it hits 346, sometimes like trades around 330, 320? If it does, it would be the same thing as it also getting that 346 point break, right? So what would be the minimum area you'd have to trigger if they did, let's say, take out 68, 52 to 58? What would be the very first area that you would have to come back and take out? And it makes sense based on the core range and based on math. What would you have to take out? You guys have to start setting conditions soon because we're not that far away from these dates or these price points. So it's good to at least have a plan ahead of time. What would your very, very first condition be? Let's see who's paying attention. So them stalling those areas means that they would stall 320, 330 points off lows, right? That's closer to the 68.50s. 346 points is 6871. What would your condition be if you take out 6858? And usually when you extend, how many points do you normally break? Usually when you break, and I've talked about this several times, usually when you break 346 points, often how many points do you normally break? What kind of extensions do you get? Okay, 350 or 250 flip tried a little bit here. What kind of extensions do you guys normally get? Come on, you guys. Obviously, the first answer is you have to break 6871. How many points do you normally break if you take out 346 points on average? And expand, because that could be an expansion scenario. I hate that we're on Twitch because I can't see who's watching and I can't call people out. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. If you take out 346 points, what kind of range do you normally trigger first? $300 what? And we've talked about this a lot. I talked about it on Monday. It's usually like the same offsetting range. It's that 26 to 33, 34 point offsets. And it's crazy because I bet you money I can look this up. How much do you guys want to bet? This is how I know that no one pays attention. I can look this up in 2 seconds and I can find it. You guys ready? Let's see. 375. Oh, once we break. Oh, it's right there. Why do you guys not like pay attention to any of these things? The 375 point range break right now on the daily is exactly 375 points. Do you see that? This is insane. Look. And that's usually the increments when we break. Anytime we break 346 points, we almost always hit around 375, 380. Almost always. So that would equate to coming back and getting this retest of 69.06, 69.10, this lower high from like the mid-month. You can also think of that as like, I'm going to tag you guys in this, so if I ever ask again. Then there's no way you guys cannot remember this, okay? I don't think I would have posted something like that on Twitter. It's basically the same thing though as like in the simplest way, it's the 33, 34 point extension. Does that make sense? Because normally if you start expanding, usually you trigger around like 34 points. And that's what can get you 6668. That's why right now they're stalling 68 points from lows. And that's why sometimes too, when you break 380, you end up getting like 410, 420. 420 is really common too, I've noticed. And I think that's probably because of the 44-point breaks or something off of there, like off of 375 or 380. Or like you can think of it, I guess, as like the 68-point breaks. Whatever way makes it make sense. This to me seems like they are going to keep this stuck until close to 330. We still have odds today though of them even just staying stuck in the channel if they really wanted to. That's part of the issue with today's ranges, because the channel area can really just keep us stuck all afternoon, especially since they've had a lot of after hour breaks. We can use the 23-minute today too, since there's some alignment with highs. So they have a small window here, I guess, between 42 and 05. This also aligns with 08. We can also watch the 49-minute, which has a pretty nasty bear flag unless they negate that. This runs till 314. So what's half of that range? 245. 245. Till 314. So that means that they have to hold structure around here. That's half the time frame. Do you see that? 75% of that range is probably the 36, 37-minute interval. So here, they would probably have to retrace right here just after 3. Okay. Otherwise, there's a lot of volatility risk all the way through till 305 and 314. This is a window of risk in here. Okay. So importance of holding and retracing here is crucial. So they have this window here has to go green here. Basically between here, these structural holds in here. Okay. I'm showing you guys, by the way, how to break down structure, because I feel like not many people are good at that. This is 50% of your structure. This is 75% of your structure. This is the remaining 25% of your structure. Okay, which there's some alignment here. So this is nice because this is ahead of 305, the 301.02. So at the very least, I feel like you'd have to try taking out that mid structure around 4.2, 4.3. And I'm not really sure exactly how many points that is off these lows, but I would think that's probably, this is a 17-point break. Yeah, 4.2. So probably at least 4.2. This is probably the 22-point stall right here. Because otherwise that could start creating a pretty bad reversal pattern. And then this is the one that's stuck until 328. 49-minute, 14, 3. So you'd probably want that 49-minute to flag. Meaning you need to hold at least around 3.6 and 3.3. I think they did hold 3.350 here. Sorry, trading in a channel is pretty boring. At least if we can at least try to understand our ranges and odds, it's still helpful. So we already know that 42 is obviously an overhead. Same with 47. 3.332 is really important support right now, because we don't really want to get back into the zone, which would be like getting back beneath like this area right here. We also know we have odds of staying stuck until the last half hour. We also know we have odds of structural breakdowns if we don't retrace during this very calculated time period here. How many think that they're going to try testing 68.42 by this calculated period that we just looked at? I just showed you guys, by the way, how to calculate a structure, so hopefully you guys were paying attention. At 3:02 p.m. Or I guess you could say like ahead of 3:05, because technically there's still a... I like that this is not till 3:05. Why? Why do you guys think I like that this doesn't flip until 3:05? Why do you think that is? Why would I like that? Why do I like that that doesn't flip until 3:05? Well, if this is a period between 3:01 and 3:02, okay, and we don't really have bearish structures that start until 3:05, does that not give me a few extra minutes of time? Yeah, exactly. So like, let's say for instance, they start stalling 68.40, which they are. It could give me that little tiny window here. There's 2 minutes before this potential volatility period starts. If this retraces and breaks during this window here, could that help negate this window of volatility in here? Even if it doesn't expand range up, could it at least negate the downside volatility? I'm just going to mark that structural break right here because I'm not sure exactly what it is. 684. Okay, so it's 4175, which 42 is the 17-point break. So that would make sense that I think I have an alert set at 42. Can you guys do you guys feel the pressure here just beneath that 4175? Ahead of 305? I'm only going to set that to a minute because there's not that much time. If you guys can vote on that too. So what do you think would happen if they, let's say they stall this area here for 304, but let's say they try testing here at 304, sorry, but let's say they try testing at 305. Like, let's say that they get some sort of a structure break like this at like 305. What would you need to see? Especially considering that this opens up a window for volatility right here. And they're not stalling in like a super bad spot, but it's definitely not like a great area for them to take it back to. Like 40, 38 is okay. At least it's above 3637, but it's still beneath 4142. Do you see that immediate volatility right at 305? And I would bet money that this range in this stick likely would have gotten you that break back above this 4.2 area. So what would you have to see happen here? Because now we have roughly 9 minutes of volatility where bears have a little bit more control. What would you have to see happen? Are you guys surprised to see these candles like this at 305, 306? No, because they never broke that 42 overhead ahead of time. So it left that window of volatility alive. Oh, Intel actually came all the way back to 37. Bank of America is finally breaking that 53.14. Banks actually had a really nice break back above these ranges here. I don't know if any of you guys were watching these, but most of them had a good turnaround this week. Okay, so if they break down this structure, this is going to have a valid bear flag, especially for coming back and retesting 6825, 6820, 683331. We're trying to hold a 50% ratio, which is close to 3334. This could engulf because it is above its highs, meaning that would take it all the way back to 6820. What would you have to do here? Because this is a massive window of volatility. Because they could easily trigger this all the way back down to here if they wanted to. They could engulf this period. Okay? Yeah, and probably by like the mid range. So them dropping it ahead of time is probably better because I'd rather they bring it down first so that they have an odd to try to retrace, maybe by like the mid frame, like here at 309, 310. Well, but what would be the condition that they'd have to meet? It's not just about retracing. Where would they have to retrace? Just to at least mitigate that risk. Because this can also form a really nice flag, which is what I prefer that they do, so that we can have this and these structures kind of form this afternoon. I know my chart's super messy, but you guys get the idea. And that would really help for like overnight continuation if we had a nice big flag off highs. But obviously to do that, you have to stay stuck inside by 3:15. No, you'd probably have to retract at least back over 3.8, I would say, by these mid frames. The mid frame is closer to like 3:10 and 30 seconds. So maybe let's watch this. It's like closer to this point in time. Okay. Which I know sounds insane, but that's more calculated. Like this point in time is more calculated of retesting this area here. And I could sound crazy, but that is just what it is. Like I would bet money that this stick here would probably retest these areas here. You guys seeing this? Isn't that crazy? Look how insane that is. This is the calculated time. 3:10 and 15 to 30 seconds. At this here, right here. And look at where it's testing. 68, 41, 50 being retested here off the second intervals. Isn't that cool? How insane is that? They're off by like 0.5. Okay? But is this at least enough to help this bear period here that flips in 2 minutes? I would say yes, because we don't even really need this to go green, to be honest with you. We just kind of want it to not break down. But what was the other time frame? 161. I would be more concerned if this frame went green, I guess. So even if it stays sideways for another 15 minutes, I don't really care, because I would rather have a flag than just a stick up, I guess, or a potential star pattern from forming. But if they're going to do that, then I would at the very least want it to get back to 4.2 just so it can reduce the risk a little bit here. Does that make sense? So what time would we want that to happen at? I'm guiding you guys through a structural breakdown and reversal, because like I feel like these are things that a lot of people struggle with. What point in time would we want it to come back and break and retest this 6842 by? Ahead of ahead of 314. So it has to be closer to like 312, 313. Make sense? Because now this is going to be completely negated. The only thing that we're scared of, though, okay, this is what I meant. If they're going to break, though, off this time interval, do I really want like a star-like pattern like this to form? What do you think? No, because this can make a nasty reversal, okay? So if they're going to do something like this, what do we want this 313 and 314 stick to do? Specifically to prevent this from happening. Because this is where it could trigger a... No, it doesn't have to flag. Flagging would mean coming back down. Which I don't think there's enough time for it to do that. Because, like, pay attention to where they're stalling it. They're still stalling it beneath these structures. Okay? Which can cause a reversal right away. What would you have to do within this 14 stick? And this, it doesn't really negate that risk, but it at least helps reduce it. Because now we have 49 minutes of potential volatility due to where they close this 313 candle. Okay? What would they have to do? Basically immediately off this range. Yes, they have to try taking out that 684325. Okay? Just to at least help offset some of this volatility risk now that we have. Does that make sense? Do you see what I mean? And I would bet money that they'd close it there. Look at that. Do you guys see how calculated that is? Look at where they closed it final seconds. Do you see that? Do you know why they did that? They did that intentionally so that this structure Okay, at least breaks into this bar. Isn't that insane? They did it the final second too. Look. They gapped it. Just to make sure that they had that close. This is about the price action I would expect, especially if these structures could stay stuck this afternoon. I would be a little bit concerned though if they took out highs before 328, because that means that they would, if they take out highs before 328, they could make a really big reversal pattern on this time frame. Okay, and this is linked directly to highs and just before lows. I also noticed that there's a 6-minute interval between low of day here. Okay, are you guys listening? I'm teaching you guys a time trick here. This is like 10:06. I think we hit lows today at 10. We hit lows today at 10:06. But this was the more calculated area that they brought it back to at 68:02. Do you see this? And the 01 area. So this area was a little bit better for structure. Meaning we might have like a 6-minute window here before 328. How many people think we're going to test highs here for 321, 322? I'm only going to set this to 2 minutes because we don't have that much time. Because I feel like if they break highs here, then they have an odd to extend. Where's the high of day stick? Because this candle would be, the final minute stick would be 327. So we have odds of high of day coming up right here. Probably close to the 318, 320, 321 intervals. And that's if they want to break early off this, which would basically negate. I'd be careful though, because they could break it up and then they would still have enough time to bring it back down. Does that make sense? At that point, I would rather they do that so it could keep that flag formation intact. Can you guys vote on that poll? Please. And I'm only using this just because there was that 6-minute offset between the actual low of day and those structural flips. It could also actually be 5 minutes, I guess, because the final stick would be the 5-minute interval right here. So I guess this could be maybe a minute earlier. Let's see. Yeah, so like off here, or yeah, that's the 321. Oh. So like 320, basically between 21 to 23. Would this be the best point in time to take out high of day, you guys think? Or retest it? I want to hear your logic behind this. Would this be the best point in time to retest high of day? Let's hear your logic behind this. I want to see how your brain processes this kind of information or structure. What do you guys think? Okay, so with some conditions, Strikerman, this would be the best point in time to take out high of day. Okay, just to at least make a mark that they want to trigger higher with the condition that they come back down. Does that make sense? Or like entirely negate the structure by pushing all the way through so that you don't have a star-like pattern. Does that make sense? So if they're going to take a high of day here, then it better come back down a little bit after it does, before 328, or push way higher. Otherwise, you're better off staying still. Does that make sense? If they're going to do this, they better come back here. If they can't come back here, they better keep pushing up to like the 50s. Does that make sense? There's no in between. They either like dedicate to breaking highs and breaking higher, right? Or they make a higher high just to at least keep those odds favorable for 328 to 4 o'clock, and then bring it back down. Okay, everyone's on the same page? All right, let's see. What did you guys vote? You see how they're kind of just like hovering at highs here too? What do you guys think? You think it does it during this window here, or you think that it doesn't have the momentum to do so? If it's not ready though, I would say that it's probably better off stalling instead of ruining that really nice structure that we've had forming for the last 2 hours. I mark these because I figured if they are going to break, it would probably be closer to like this interval here, or if they're going to stall, I would think that volatility would probably start coming in around these ranges here, or volume. Look at that. So what about if they break closer to like 324 and 327? Is that an ideal point in time, you think, to break? I don't think so, because I feel like now they really have to push range, because now there's not enough time. 4.5 points of reductions here. That could have gotten the top of the channel. Thank you so much for the raid, Snowman. Snowman Sports. A sports channel? Everyone welcome the Snowman group. Are you Canadian? We got like 30 centimeters of snow in the last 2 days. Gambling? Who's gambling? These notes on here, guys, are pretty old. Oh, what does he gamble? Like sports betting? You guys think that we can predict odds for sports betting? I feel like we could if we tried. All right, let's do one more poll here since we're getting pretty close. I really didn't want them to do this at 328, but it looks like they could. I would rather they keep this beneath just so... Yeah, I could imagine it's probably maybe the same. I'm like a time-based math trader though, so I guess if you use math, maybe? I don't know if timing would matter though with sports betting. We're basically looking to see if we can try testing highs here during this 328 window that's coming up. I didn't really want us to at this point just because that puts us at risk. I'd rather they kind of keep this in here and then have maybe some good continuation post 328. So if we had some nice sticks after 328, maybe closer to like 330, 332, 336 during imbalance prints, I would say that that would probably be the better case scenario for us. I would prefer that they keep this just at a standstill here. Ideally at that 6842 area, which is where it seems like they're holding. I don't know. But they're sports bettors, so I feel like they fit the group well. You guys think that trading is gambling? Well, thanks for being here, guys and girls. Yeah, that's true. Where is everyone from? What even is the demographic on Twitch? Like, where are most people on Twitch even from? I don't even know. I would imagine probably the States, but I feel like Europeans in the chat. Is Twitch even a big thing in Europe? I feel like it's not. I feel like it's more of an American thing. All right, what do you guys think? You think now that they basically sustained structure here, they maintained this potential flag-like formation for the last hour of the session today. It looks good. I didn't want us to do anything really. I just kind of wanted us to stay at a standstill so that we'd have odds from now until end of session, because otherwise that would have looked really ugly in terms of like a structural break. And then we have imbalance prints coming out in the next few minutes. Let me reset this. And we avoided this window of volatility here, which is really good. And got back to our 4-2. I noticed that they also held right off that 4-1-7-5. I don't know if you guys noticed that calculated area that we talked about right at the 327, 328 mark. So that means that they sustained structure there right off 68, 41, 75, which can really help our 330 to 332, 336 window. We basically have from now until end of session though, so it doesn't really matter if they break range during this time because we still have from now until close. But by session, I mean like the actual session close, not real-time session for 4. For those that are holding like same-day expiration or something on SPX or SPY. All right, let's maybe start doing some range pulls. Max range for session, highs are in 68.48, 68.49, 68.52, 68.55, or 68.58. I'll set that for 5 minutes. And we can keep using the 23-minute intervals too, because this was linked to high of day and also formed a pretty decent looking 3-bar continuation here. Like this is a really nice negation pattern, but again, this runs all the way till 351, which it's not that it sucks, it's just that this could delay until close, like until that 350 to 4 o'clock window. I feel like I can already tell the H group in here. Oh, that would make more sense. I took my... My 6-year-old niece says that a lot too, and I'm like, stop saying that. Right. Okay, my nephew. Okay, so whatever that means. I think he was calling me ugly. Really. Because I'm like, who the... I'm like, what? Stop commenting that. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about Gen Alpha. Can we get some more votes, guys, please? Because it is a pretty crucial time. I don't really like that this runs till session close, because that means that they could run this after the bell, unfortunately. So I would probably avoid SPX if anyone's trading that, but I feel like maybe the SPY contracts are rolling over to Friday, like I said. Or what the Sigma? I've never heard that. Now I just feel old. We have an odd though at 351 and 350. So this window runs Noble Mom from 328 till close. Till 5 p.m. So not necessarily, but I would think that probably in the first 25% of the window, you'd probably have to try breaking. I don't know. Maybe it's more entertaining than this though. He says it all the time. I have no what the Sigma? I'll ask my nephew what that is. Well, I'm a millennial, guys. I'm sorry. I'm old. Sorry. I'll ask my 14-year-old nephew what that means. And then he'll probably laugh at me and be like, why are you asking this? Or I'll ask my 10-year-old niece. They're like chronically online. How old is your son, Miss 24 Carats? You're Canadian too, though, right, Miss 24 Carats? I feel like Canadian kids though are not as bad as American kids in terms of like being online. I feel like we have some restrictions here in the content that we see. Like in terms of like what the algorithms here generate for us versus what they might generate in the States. Wait. I feel like banks have been holding up, which is kind of helping us a little bit. Oh, okay, so you're not in high school, so that's good. Crypto's holding up pretty well too. It broke right off that 6,043 point range. Meaning there's odds of Bitcoin getting back to that 93,477 range. Off here. Aw, thanks, Boulder. How do you guys do those subs for 4 months? In your sports bets? So like what did you guys bet on exactly? German cricket? What? German cricket. I didn't even know that was a thing. I thought cricket was mostly an Indian sport. Okay, I was gonna say Iowa State. Oh. Well, actually, you know what? I should text Amir to join the stream. One of my best trading friends used to play for the Cardinals. I'm not a sports fan, obviously. Clearly. Maybe he can help you guys out. He also played for Notre Dame. Let me add him in the chat. Tell him that there's some sports bettors on Twitch. since you guys are in here, I'm gonna be a good friend. You're definitely asking the wrong person. This window here. Well, our odds are kind of higher, closer to like 345, 348, 350, 351. So I wasn't really expecting it to do much here. We just kind of have to hold off 6836, 38 into the close to at least keep these odds in play for the 6844, 6846 retest. That's a pretty good negation stick here in terms of trying to retract range at 342. You just you just bet against yourself. 68, 41, 75 retraced here at 342 ahead of this 345 window. 345 was the earliest point in time I had to come back and try retesting these ranges here. Odds are a little bit higher, closer to end of day, so like final 10 minutes. So we'll have to see. We have an actual flip today at 351, which is not very common. It's usually closer to 350. Of course, we're going to watch our 354, 355 window, and then the final minute here before close. We also have a flip today, guys, at 403. So there are odds for after hour continuation. Okay, just so that you guys are aware. Okay. I think mostly this would be like that 68, 42, 75, 68, 43 wall up here. Okay, how many think that they could clear these ranges in real time today? How many people think that they're going to keep this stuck until after 4? So real time hours would be till 4 p.m. So 3:59. This would be the last 15 minutes coming up right here. Slipperman, are you ever not a bull? Have you ever not been a bull? So far from the looks of it, they're keeping this pretty stuck, but they could also be keeping this extremely stuck to do what? And it would make sense if this is what they planned on doing. Okay, so you think that they keep it beneath 6847, whatever that high range is? 6846 is extremely calculated. 4650. I think 47 is the high that they stalled. $45 trying to get some structural breaks here. Yeah, I don't think so. I think not. This has been pretty dreadful to hold, which is why I said earlier this morning, maybe roll into Friday, because if they keep this stuck in the channel here, then this could end up becoming a very, very, very boring afternoon. And especially when I saw odds for like 330, 328, I'm like, oh, they could make this a very late day trade. That's true. Okay, let's see here. Can you guys vote on that, please? Like 4 people voting is pretty sad. And I set 5 minutes because I'm like, oh, okay, maybe if there's extra time, more people would vote, but then no one votes, and it's like the same 4 people voting. But so range breaks in real time means that we would take out 6847 before 4 o'clock. That's what that means. And I would think in order to do that, they'd probably have to break around that 350, 351 window. Oh, okay, maybe that's why. We do have a flip today at 351, so that's actually really important, because then that would give more confluence for our 350 period too. Well, our fib, we know we're getting stuck because this is the final day for our 75% frame here. Today would be the 75% range. So I figured they could stall 75% of the range in 75% of the time. You know, 75% of the time between the 17th and the 2nd is today. And that's where they're stalling. So I know that that's a huge overhead, but hence they could have a lot of reductions, a lot of stalls, a lot of delays, especially around that 68, 46, 47 area. Look at this reduction stick here too at 4.7 ahead of 4.8. Why do we not have 4.9 marked? So in terms of conditions, I would imagine that you probably need to have this at least back over, at least over that 68.40, 175 before 350 for this to even have like odds of getting those clear breaks for end of session today. These are also very pinnable areas between 68.22 and 68.46, so they kind of just left this entire range here open for end of session today if they decide to not clear. If we can't get back over 6848 to 6852.58, what are we better off doing? What do you guys think? If they can't give us those range breaks, okay, back to the 68.52 to 58 area, well, we are in the channel. But think about it, especially if this is more of like a core. What was the theme for today anyway? What did I say we had the highest odds of doing today? And off the report, I mentioned this morning. Okay, so like this area technically could be healthier, okay? Especially if they want to just keep it there. We talked about this yesterday, so, but in that case scenario, if they end up stalling the channel, let's say, which is what they're doing, okay, even getting it back to the channel would be amazing. So I don't really, hitting 68.38 to 68.48 is technically more than enough for the week, okay? Does everyone agree with that? Especially by the 26th. Are you guys in agreement? Okay, so if they couldn't sustain this area here, the best case scenario would be to take it lower, okay? Because if they can't get it to the 50s, then I would think getting it back to like 22, 24, 28 might actually be a little bit better. That would be the only case scenario where I would be okay with them taking out 32, 33, as if they can't get it high enough. Otherwise, if they just digest the 3.8 to 4.8 area, then they would have to meet those overnight conditions. Does that make sense? And odds seemed a little bit better for after the close, but 350, 351, back testing that 6833, 6834, which was the area that we mentioned we had to try to sustain in order to get those range breaks today. Yeah, I would prefer that they hold the 20s. Technically speaking, they could take it back to like 6818 and it would probably still be okay, but I think holding 20s would be better in terms of like those range breaks. Because based on this, it seems like they wanted to stall. Look at where they took it back to. They're like trying to hold right at that zone area here. This seems like they tried to limit range into the close, and I would say likely back to this range in here or this area in here. This made sense too, especially when they kind of stalled back around this calculated point that we had right here. And again, around 345 and that reduction stick at 347. Because I feel like the reduction at 347 is basically what limited us to get those breaks in real time today. I voted no on the real time breaks because it seemed like they were stalling quite a bit. And also because we had some odds at like 403 and 413. So I wondered if they waited till after the bell or something. What are usually your final points of turnaround if the market actually wants to give a structural break? Yeah, so that's coming up pretty soon here. How much range do you think they'd have to retrace at 5455 in order for that to actually have any sort of an odd, especially between like this 53, 54, 55 window? I'm going to delete these just so I can see the candles better. So SPX would basically close in core ranges. SPX stalled right at the top of the channel or the zone. I didn't realize that. Can someone note that? SPX stalled 6832. So that would make sense if ES is stalling that 6846 area. based on this kind of price action, I would imagine that they're keeping that window open for like that 68.28 through 22 area into the close. And like I said earlier, I feel like if they can't break range, they're better off taking it a little bit lower into the close, because these areas, based on like math ranges, would be a little bit more protective, because they're still core ranges, unless they can sustain and then take this out in the after hours, like after 4 o'clock, which those odds seem pretty low, especially based on what they did between like the 5-4, 5-5 window. Can you guys try pinning the close here? Where do you guys think that they'll take this to? Thank you. You have a good day tomorrow too. Happy Thanksgiving to those in the chat that are celebrating tomorrow. This is a very important close for us too, especially with it being the final day ahead of the 28th flip. Anywhere in this area, honestly, is still fine. Like 68, 20s, 30s. These are really calculated ranges for us on the week anyway. So them keeping it in this range still gives us those odds of the 68, 50s for the week on Friday, especially if they're trying to limit some of this range here ahead of month end. I'm going to stick around for the 15 minutes after the close though, just because we have odds at 03 and 14. And I want to see what they do in the final 2 minutes here into the close. Where do you guys think that they're going to pin this here? Try to pin the close, guys. Where do you think they're going to pin this? So SPX right now is basically hovering 68.18. I'd want SPX at least back over 20 to 22. So I feel like that would make ES back over 683738. The most ideal area is going to be around that 41.75, but I feel like that would be a lot of range to retrace in a minute, so probably not as likely. And they'd also have to try retracting pretty soon here in like the next 30 seconds for that to be the case, like at least bring it back into the channel. Otherwise, it's going to increase those odds of getting these types of pins closer to this area down here. Three. That wouldn't be terrible. I feel like if they can break into the channel though in like the first 30 seconds, then they could have some decent odds for after 4. Otherwise, they're probably going to keep this mid-channel to upper zone bound, which is between 6822 and 6838. And like I said too, if they can't take this higher, then they're better off taking it back down, like to these areas that we discussed. 68.28 being back tested here into the close. Seems like they'd want more of a core kind of break, which, like I was saying earlier, if they can't get it high enough, like above 4.2, you're better off taking it back to the 20s, closer to these calculated core areas here. So exactly where they took it back to. 68.25 retested here into the close. We'll see if 4 p.m. has odds of retracting this back up. I think a core close isn't bad as long as they bring it back up in the after hours session here, okay? And we had some better odds after 4 o'clock, like between 4, 403, 413, 414. I do want to see though if they can get this back into the channel by that 403 window. Overnight conditions, I would like to see us try sustaining off that 68. I guess we could have like 6802, 6804, 6803, but ideally above 6814 and 16 would be better. If we can protect like these core areas in here. 6820 to 22 would be best case scenario. I'd like us to try retesting 6846 at least to the top of the channel, close to 6840, 48, 49. With 68, 52, 55 being really big overheads for us in the overnight session if they end up clearing highs. Did this help you guys into the close here? I kind of figured when I saw them stall at 345 that they likely weren't going to bring this much higher, and if they're going to push this, it's better off that they take it back to these areas in here. So someone mentioned earlier going lower to go higher. This would be an example of going lower to go higher, not what you mentioned earlier. Earlier, this wasn't going lower to go higher. This was a support area that we could afford. Like we could have afforded to have gone back here. This would be more of a going lower to go higher because these 20s are linked to the 50s. Okay, so sometimes if you can't break enough range, you're better off resetting and retracting back to a more calculated area that could get you there. Does that make sense? So these areas here are a little bit more calculated around 682375, 6824, 6828. For session close, it would be nice if they could get us back in the channel. I don't know if we have enough momentum to do that, but getting back here would be the best case scenario for us, or at least back to like 3-3. Any questions for me before I end the stream ahead of the holidays here? Because our market's closed tomorrow. We have a half day on Friday. I can't find my Intel template. I don't know what happened to it. Like my primary template on Intel, I don't know where it went, because this isn't it. But essentially, like the structural hold off here could get this back to 41. But I do know that 37 was a big spot on this. I can't find my previous template on this, like the one that I checked every single one of these and I couldn't find it. None of these are it. But the goal on this is to get it back to that. Is to get it back to that spot, but this isn't it either. This is this it actually? This seems, I think this one's old. But I do remember that we used those really like old ranges from way back in here, like those previous gaps from way back. I think it was back in here. Okay, so I'm pretty sure back in here. Just basically has to come back over these ranges, I think, is what we looked at. Because last time they stalled. Just in short. Okay. this area here. So I feel like bringing it back above like that 37 area, there's a lot of overhead around 40, but the bigger break is more of that 42 range. Okay, that was pretty, this wasn't bad off that 03 flip. So there's a window here between 03 and 14. So I just want to see if they bring ES back to this little channel area before the close. Okay, I'm going to end the stream, guys. There's only the one report this week since it's a shorter week, and I've been pretty good with putting out a bunch of notes, which you guys can obviously gather that I put out a lot of notes yesterday and the day before. For tonight, really, it's just going to be holding these neutral areas, ideally core ranges, getting back into the channel, and ideally getting the 68.52 to 58 retest this week. 68.71 could still be on the table for Friday. It is a shorter session though, so I'm not going to get my hopes all the way up. But if they also want to just digest us on Friday, that could also be the case if they decide that they've capped out on range in the channel. I feel like they haven't though, based on these types of structural breaks we've had. So I still think our odds for Friday are relatively decent. Okay, I will see you guys on Friday. Have a good Thanksgiving and happy